Good morning students, welcome to our today's session. Hope you read the chapter that we discussed in our previous class. Today we are going on with a poem named A Photograph written by Shirley Tolson. Take your textbook and go on with me, read the text when I am explaining this chapter. So in this poem, the poet is talking about a photograph in which the author's mother and her two cousin sisters are there. So her mother is holding her two cousin sisters in her hands and they are at the sea for a holiday. Now look at the chapter. I'll read the line, look at the lesson. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding on of my mother's hand, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, was their terribly transient feat. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot, see Betty and Dolly, she'd say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter, both dry with the labored ease of loss. Now she is being dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Now look at the first answer once again. Look at the first answer. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. From the picture, the photograph which is sticked on the cardboard. From that photograph, I can see how these two girls were paddling. Paddling means moving with very difficulty in the water. So walking, actually not moving, walking in the water with very difficulty. So I can see these girls paddling in the water. So that is the picture about these girls paddling in the water. So who are those girls? Dolly and Betty, two cousin sisters of our writer's mother. So her mother was around 12 years old at that time. So she has these two girls in her hand, one in one hand, the other in the other hand, and all these three girls are paddling in the water. So that is there in the photograph which is sticked over there in the cardboard. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. Each one hold one of my mother's hands. So these two girls, each one of them are holding my mother's hand. And she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. And who is the big girl there? My mother is the big girl there, and my mother seems to be 12 years or something. So she is the elder girl in the picture, and these two other girls, Dolly and Betty, are in her hands, and these three girls are paddling forward in the water. And who is taking the photograph? The uncle. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. So these three girls, they are paddling in the water, they are standing there and looking at the camera and smiling. Their uncle is taking the photograph and these girls are smiling at the uncle. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. So my mother's face, it is so sweet. So all these things happened before I was born. My mother was 12 years old. So definitely before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, was their terribly transient feat. And the sea, that sea, even if it was after all these years, it will be around 40-50 years. But the sea doesn't have much changes. So here the poet is talking about the transient life of human beings. Our birth, death, all these things are very transient. It is not eternal. But she is talking about eternal life, eternal condition of the sea. There is no change for the sea even after all these days. So my mother was 12 at that time. She was so happy. She was posing for the photo with her two cousin sisters in her hands, Dolly and Betty, each on her side. And And the sea, it doesn't have much changes at all. It remains eternal. But these girls, the time changes, and these girls, they have grown up and became older. Now look at the second stanza. Some 20-30 years later, she had laughed at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she had said. And after 20-30 years, my mother might have laughed at the photograph, and she was saying, look at Betty and Dolly and how these people, elder people, had dressed us up for this beach holiday, for this sea holiday. So look at this Betty, and she was looking after 20-30 years. My mother was looking at this photograph and she was smiling. She was so happy seeing this photograph, and she was telling that now look at Betty and Dolly there, they are small girls, and how these people had dressed us up for this sea holiday. The holiday was her past, mine is her laughter, both dry with the labored ease of lows. So the poet is telling us that the sea holiday was my mother's past. So my mother is memorizing all those things when she sees this photograph. So my mother was remembering about those days, that particular day when she went with her cousin, sister and uncle to the sea. And for her, it was her past. The photograph was her past. And for our poet, her mother's smile is a past now. There will be some reason, isn't it? So she is telling that for my mother, the photograph is her past, and for me, her smile is her past. Both right, both are amused, or both are annoyed with the compelled, forced ease of loss. So something both of us lost. My mother lost his childhood days, and I lost my mother. So for both of us, this photograph is our past. For my mother, those days are her past, and for me, her smile is past. For both of us, this photograph is something like a compelled memory, compelled feeling of loss. Okay, so in the first stanza, the poet is talking about a particular period in her life, in her mother's life, when her mother was a 12-year girl. In the second stanza, she is talking about a period of time when her mother was 20-30 years, and when her mother saw the photograph and how she recalled all those days and she laughed. And in the second stanza, the poetess is telling us that this photograph was something like a compelled feeling of loss for both of us, because the photograph was past for her mother because it brought all the memories back, and for her, her mother's smile is a past because her mother is already dead. She lost her mother. Now look at the third stanza. Now she's been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Now my mother is no more. Now there is nothing to talk. It is complete silence. The silence silences. The silence silences means the silence makes everything silent. Okay, so there is nothing more to talk now. So it talks about two different periods of time. The first stanza talks about when her mother was 12 years old. Second stanza talks about when her mother was 30-40 years old. And third stanza talks about the present time when our poetess is thinking about all these things, and she is saying us that silence silences everything. It is complete silence now. So I believe you understood this poem. Now look at the poetic devices used there. First poetic device is personification. Personification comes in two areas in the poem. In the first stanza, when we are talking about the cardboard is speaking. The cardboard shows me. So there an inanimate object is personified. So personification is a poetic device in those lines. So note it down in your textbook. Personification in the first line and personification in the last line of the poem. Silence silences. Again, silence is taken as a person. So silence silences is a personification used in this line. And another important poetic device comes in the poem. It is alliteration. Transient, terribly transient feet. Second stanza, last line. terribly transient feet. The T sound is repeated. Terribly transient feet. Alliteration. Again silence, silences. S sound is repeated. So there alliteration also comes. So personification and alliteration are the two different poetic devices, main poetic devices used in this poem. Personification, when we are talking about this cardboard, speaks, shows, and silence, silences. Alliteration is terribly transient feet and silence, silences. So I hope you understood the poem and you noted out the poetic devices. Now watch the URL, download the notes, learn it, and before that you attend the review test today itself, immediately after watching this video. Thank you. Have a great day.